Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da. Domo arigato, geek to me radio, da 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 da.
Welcome, geeks and nerds, girls and boys, to a brand new edition of Geek to Me Radio. Today we have JP Karliack on talking about his many voice projects and his acting projects and everything in between. Then we'll be joined by Clayton Farris and Elizabeth Grullón talking about their new movie Roadhead. All that and more. Stand by.
We're talking TV, comics and movies, and video games. And if you don't know Star Trek from Star Wars, we'll try to explain. There are 12 doctors for Hogwarts houses, one ring rules them all. To be the greatest Pokemon master, you must catch them all. You must catch them all. Try to catch them all. Gotta catch them all. Gotta catch them all.
And if you're driving around the greater St. Louis area tonight, hearing us on the big 550 KTRS, we thank you for tuning in there. If you're watching us on Instagram, hello to you, as David DeRose evidently is. I'm sorry we're keeping you up so late, David. We saw your comment. I'm terribly sorry to contribute to your lack of sleep. And of course, if you're streaming us on YouTube, Twitch, or Facebook, hello to all of you. Full show. We have 3 guests tonight and a lot to talk about with everyone. So we're going to start. JP Karliack's a voice actor. So thank you for joining me today. It's good to talk to you. This has been we've been going back and forth trying to find a good time, so now we finally got you on. So welcome to the show.
I know. You got me at the best possible time when it is hot as hell in my booth. So yay!
Yeah, it's a nice setup, though. I was seeing on the picture there on the video. It's a very nice setup you have there.
Thank you. Yeah.
I guess that's kind of a must, especially during. No doubt you were doing a lot of voice work during a pandemic. So I guess everyone has their home studios now a must.
Yeah, I mean, I had this thing probably a year prior to, but once the pandemic hit, I had to upgrade it with, all sorts of internet and computers and stuff. So yeah, I live in here now.
Well, we need to put an air conditioning next, it sounds like.
Yes. Yeah. One that is absolutely quiet.
Right.
So yeah.
If you can find one of those, let me know. Right before we had the show started, and I started to introduce you, and you weren't able to hear me at the time, it looked like, but I asked you a question. I started to say you're a voice actor in these, and you do other acting. Do you have a preference whether people call you an actor or a voice actor? Because we've had people on who are very specific about how they want to be called. Do you have a preference?
Just don't call me late for dinner. No, but I think the one caveat I have about the title is please include actor.
Sure.
Please know, because whenever we get have you done any real acting? I'm like, oh, you're in trouble now.
Right. Yeah, people like that don't understand the industry clearly if they're asking you questions like that.
Yes. Yeah. But yeah, voice actor, voiceover artist. Any of that works. Whatever.
And I've got to ask you about it was one of my favorite shows, and whenever I really end up liking a show, 9 times out of 10 they cancel it or it goes away too soon. You were in Ringer with Sarah Michelle Gellar, and I loved that show. So it must have been. So if you could just let me fanboy out for a minute, talk a little bit about doing that episode.
I mean, it was such a random thing, and I mean, huge thanks to the casting office of Shaner and Testa for putting me in it, because I'll be honest, like, I was probably at what I consider to be like the tail end of my on-camera pursuits. I'm not going to say career, but pursuits, because I started getting into a voiceover just a few years prior, and when you've got like a day job and you've got those precious pennies about like where am I going to invest in my career, I really started like shifting a lot more towards demos and casting and everything for voiceover as opposed to on camera. So it got to the point when anytime I got an on camera audition, I just was like, well, let's go have fun.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the best way to go into it. So I just went in being like, I'll never get this, but let's just have a party. And I totally booked it. And it was a blast. And Sarah Michelle was She was very focused. Her kids were young at the time, I think, so she was just really focused on like doing the show and like I'm going to do the scene and then I'm going to focus on my kids. Scene, kids, scene, kids. But in between our scenes, we did have a little repartee, and she was like, "You have an accent." I'm like, "Oh no, it's come out." And she's like, "You're East Coast, aren't you?" I'm like, "Oh yeah, I'm from Scranton." She's like, yeah, I spotted it." She was really nice, and we had a great time. But it was quick, 2 scenes in and out one day. It was nice.
That was such a great show, and I saw that on your IMDb resume. I'm like, oh, I've got to ask him about this because that's, like I said, I love that show so much, and I was so bummed that it got canceled before it could have gone on so much longer, I feel.
I know, and I'm reminded of it every once in a while when I get that 57-cent check for the residuals. So
it's all about the residuals.
Fond memories. Yeah.
But I know some of the voice act. I mean, you've been in some of my favorite projects. I'm a huge Star versus the Forces of Evil guy. Love that series.
I am too. What a freaking joy!
Brilliantly written.
Is.
That show is so clever.
Yeah, I mean, episode 1, when you see a really headstrong, really vibrant princess create basically pugs that shoot lasers out of their eyes, I'm like, this is everything I've ever wanted in a show. Please give me more.
So was that one you auditioned for, and was that you were a fan before you auditioned for the part you got? Yeah.
For sure. I auditioned for who is the short but really wicked villain guy? I can't remember his name.
It went to Alan Tudyk. That's the guy, right?
That guy,
yeah.
I auditioned for him, and just reading those sides initially, I was like, oh, this is going to be real good. And then, of course, I watched the pilot, and I think I auditioned for Naysaya shortly thereafter, and it was just such a smarmy, slimy role, which I seem to get a lot of. So, it was super fun. And the voice director on it was Kelly Ward. Kelly Ward, who you may know from the Grease movie. He played one of the greasers.
Yes.
Or, those guys. Greasers, outsiders, whatever. And he directed the show, and he was also my professor in college. He's the reason that I got into voiceover.
Oh,
so
wow.
It was kind of nice. It was the first time we actually got to work together, so it was a super cool experience.
That's very nice. See, it's a nice story to go with a cool episode and a little notch on the IMDb page. Yeah, that was, like I said, it was very clever because it's one of those ones we'll put on cartoons for our dog before we leave, and I'll just as I start watching, and I'm like, well, this is actually kind of clever, and I'll sit down, and then next thing you know, I've watched 3 episodes with my dog. So it's one of those shows that kind of just pulled you in. It was very cleverly written, a lot of fun.
So if your dog is the extreme cartoon fan, is there ever a time where you're talking with somebody else about cartoons and your dog kind of does the, well, actually, James?
No, he tries not to be pretentious because he knows I have to feed him because he has no opposable thumbs, which kind of limits his, so he doesn't usually backtalk me too much.
Yeah.
But
not the battle he wants to fight.
Right, exactly. But I mean, all the projects, like I said, we could sit here and probably have you for the whole hour just me fanboying about your IMDb project. A lot of Marvel characters, which begs the question, were you a comic book fan growing up?
Sort of. I wasn't. I didn't have the traditional set of comics that everybody would have. I didn't have I did read Ultimate Spider-Man.
Okay.
That one I read for probably 24, 30 issues or whatever. But the comic books that I had were weird. I had the Nintendo comic system.
Yeah.
I had a whole bunch of issues of Captain N the Game Master and the Super Mario comic series thing.
Yeah.
I had a whole bunch of He-Man comics, some of the ones that came with the action figures, some of the ones that you actually had to buy in the store. Just random stuff. But I've always been really into superheroes, and I think it was always hard for me to kind of get into, especially because I grew up in the 80s. A lot of the comics then were just whoop, 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 where, it's and now we're in another dimension and she's a clone and wait, I have a virus and it's going to become Ant-Man. Ha! It was way too insane for me.
Yeah.
And what I loved but I would as soon as there was anything even remotely called the internet and databases that had information, I was combing through, finding out okay, well, who is this and what is their background? Just diving down the rabbit hole. And then when the Marvel movies came out, I've become a super fan. The MCU is beyond one of my favorite things because it distills everything down to something that I can handle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot when you figure there's like 80 years worth of comic history that they've been able to kind of condense into, 23 movies so far, and TV shows and counting. But just to list off, for those of you listening, Doc Sampson in Hulk Agents of Smash, Iron Fist in the video game Marvel Heroes, and then the Lego Marvel Superheroes, Baron Strucker, Marvel Lego Avengers, you were Wiccan, and then Avengers Academy, Vision, and Wiccan again, and Jarvis, not to mention voices in Spider-Man Miles Morales, which is a gorgeous video game.
Oh, good.
That's got to be a lot of fun to sit there and kind of tick these boxes off as like, oh, yeah, I played him. Yep, voiced that one too. That's kind of, I guess, fun to go back and read.
Yeah, and they're ones that I really gravitate towards. Like, I mean, Wiccan is a queer character that I have a particular affinity for. Jarvis has always been, just the fuddy-duddy in the way that I really like. But actually, my first animation job was on this little interstitial show called Marvel Mashups, which was on Disney XD, and it was kind of like these little clips. Sort of like in the old Space Ghost Coast to Coast variety, where they would take the old 70s Marvel shows, chop them up, redub them, and they would just be funny little bits.
Right.
And I got brought in alongside people like Kevin Michael Richardson and Tom Kenny and really big dudes to voice all sorts of random characters, including, I mean, Jarvis was a biggie, but I also did Hawkeye, I did Scarlet Witch, I was Black Cat, I was the magician who's like one of the Eternals, I think. I don't know. It was so many random voices. It was such goofy fun and such a great way to just kick off a career. So
no kidding. Yeah. Wow. Those redubbings that they do on some of those stuff are just really funny to just sit down and watch those. You pull them up on YouTube and just knock them out one after the other.
Yeah.
And with all the stuff, the voiceover work, like I said, we've got a lot more to talk about still. We're going to take a commercial break here in a few minutes. But with all the ones you've got, the big ones that stuck out to me were Boss Baby, the TV series, which, that's coming off a movie into a TV series. When you got cast for that, were there any nerves like, oh, so I'm kind of replacing Alec Baldwin doing this guy's voice? Did they want you to kind of imitate Alec Baldwin? They say, how did they approach that with you, and how did you end up getting the part?
Well, that's the funny thing. When I was auditioning for it, I thought I was auditioning to scratch Alec Baldwin, which the audience doesn't know. Scratch is basically when the celebrity or whoever is not available, they have somebody do a temp record so they can animate to it, and then the celebrity will come back in later and do the thing.
Right.
Alec, because he does the movie, like most celebrities, he has first right of refusal for any time Boss Baby speaks. So he had first right to do the series, and he really hadn't made it up his mind yet about whether he wanted to do it or not. So they decided to bring in moi to voice him in the meantime. And they were like, you might get it, but we'll see. And then I was like 4 episodes in, and they're like, oh, yeah, by the way, he turned it down. It's yours.
Wow.
So, yeah. And I walked in, like there were other characters I had auditioned for in the show that I thought I was a way better match for, because I don't think I do a particularly good Alec Baldwin. I think I do a very good Will Arnett doing Alec Baldwin, which is essentially what I do on the show. Right. But it worked. They loved it, and it stuck. And, I think in the beginning we were really trying to hew closer to what Alec is doing, but I think anybody, especially the children who have watched the show religiously, it does shift over time to become more me and more what I bring to it, as opposed to trying to imitate him.
I guess that must be kind of the way it goes, because we had Rob Paulson on talking about when he was doing The Mask, and obviously Jim Carrey did not want to do the thing, and Rob Paulson finally said, hey, I'm kind of just, want to throw my own stuff in here, and it ended up becoming kind of shifting away from Jim Carrey a little bit more towards Rob Paulson's style. So that's got to be, I guess, an organic thing that probably happens over the course of a series.
Yeah, because, I don't live in Alec Baldwin's head. So there's only so much that I can, there is my own sense of humor that I bring to it. And, the show and the movie, even though they're the same property, they do have their own style, they have different like there's a showrunner and a director that are totally different for each property, different writers. So yeah, they naturally diverge a little bit, even though we're telling kind of the same story.
Right. And we're talking with JP Karliack now. We're going to take a quick commercial break. You're okay to stick with us for one more little short segment?
Sure am.
All right, we're going to take this quick break then. We're going to
Hi, this is Gates McFadden. Now, don't tell my space son, but I always listen to Geek to Me Radio. Do it.
And we're back. This segment brought to you by the City of St. Charles, the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. If you're a longtime listener of the show, you know them from the website discoverstcharles.com, discoverstcharles.com. A lot of stuff happening. There's always something to do, whether or not you want to go bike riding on the Katy Trail, get some outdoor activity in, whether you're just a foodie and want to go have some cocktails at Tompkins House or some barbecue at Salt and Smoke. Lots of eateries all up and down North and South Main Street, and lots of things for history buffs to go see and do. If you're from out of town, maybe you're listening to this online, you're watching on Instagram Live, you're watching on the YouTube or the Facebook, and you're like, well, I don't live in that area. That's okay. Come and plan a trip. Now that people are getting vaccinated, people are getting back out there, you might want to go someplace new you haven't been. City of St. Charles has a lot of places you can stay, from little bed and breakfasts all the way up to full 5-star hotels with all the amenities. So you can go to the website to see what they have, plan your trip right there online, discoverstcharles.com, as we always say, for an historically good time. We're talking for another couple minutes still with JP Karliack about all of his voice work. And obviously, one of the big ones is voicing Wile E. Coyote for Looney Tunes. That's... you traditionally think of him not talking, but I can clearly hear his voice in certain episodes where he's talking about himself as a super genius and things like that. So talk a little bit about landing a major Looney Tunes character, how that felt.
Unbelievable. I mean, I grew up watching so much Bugs Bunny on Nickelodeon, and I can't say that I ever thought that Wile E. Coyote was the one that I would get,
right?
Mostly because, he doesn't talk all that much, but our sensibilities are very akin. So, because everybody says that I orbit around roles that are kind of like Sideshow Bob. So, there you go.
That's a compliment, right? I mean, that's got to be a compliment.
I appreciate it.
Okay,
I say
good.
that if there's a through line for all my characters, it's that they all went to a very nice college.
There you go.
But Wile was great because when they were casting the new Looney Tunes, they were going for very dead-on sound-alikes for like Bugs and Daffy and Porky and all of that. But for Wile E, because he hadn't been heard that much, they were a little looser. So I certainly listened to Mel and I wanted to pay homage to it, but it more was just kind of me doing my own thing that I thought would really befit a megalomaniac egotist.
Right.
So it was a blast. It was so well written, such a good show.
So you go in, obviously, a lot of these characters, like we mentioned Doc Sampson, we mentioned Wile E. Coyote and Boss Baby and things like that. You've obviously heard the voice before. Is it easier when you're given a character with kind of a blank slate where you have not heard anything and you're the one creating the voice for this character, or do you like kind of having that baseline to approach the character with?
It's kind of both.
Okay.
I mean, I love the challenge of the sound alike of, if it's something that I can tap into. I did a sound alike for Bradley Cooper that I thought I was like, me, him, what? But it's neat to find those little things. I know I can do Chris Pratt. I know I can't do Steve Carell. Like it's fun to find those things out. But there is something also lovely about creating your own character and breathing life into it and putting your own stamp on it, that you're never in the shadow of somebody else.
Sure.
Or there's not the comparison. It's always, at least the first time around, it's you,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it depends.
And voice acting versus live acting in a movie, you mentioned before that you were kind of beginning to shift towards more of the voice stuff. Do you enjoy the voice more now than you used to? Do you still prefer live acting? Do you have a preference one way or the other?
I mean, I shifted away from on camera probably in 2009, 10, somewhere in there, because I found myself getting typecast a lot in roles that were fine, but just not necessarily what I was going for. But in voiceover, I was just finding, like, that Marvel mashups thing. I was playing all different characters. One of my first big video game roles was like this Australian heavy metal rocker werewolf. And, there were just so many things that I was able to do that to look at me, people would be like, oh, I don't think so. So yeah, voiceover just became my passion and my love. That said, somebody asked me like, yeah, but if like Spielberg called you up and was like, JP, we need you for this role, would you say no? I'm like, no, of course I wouldn't. But it's not something that I like am pounding the pavement and, hustling to get.
Right. Yeah, of course. I think anybody, if Spielberg calls them up, they wouldn't probably say no anyway. But that's,
Yeah, do it.
that's one of the things you have to say yes to. But, I mean, it's got to be such a great feeling to have brought, all these characters, both in the video games and the TV stuff you've done. When you look back, what is the one that you're most like, wow, I'm the voice of this? Do you have like one or two of those?
I mean, I think being part of the Looney Tunes pantheon is huge.
We're going to take another commercial break very quick, and we'll be right back. So stand by.
Hello, this is Kari Payton, King Ezekiel from The Walking Dead, and I encourage everyone to listen to Geek to Me. It's a lovely program. Would I ever steer you wrong?
MarcusTheaters.com is the website. If you're wanting to get back out there and see a film, Marcus Theaters has plenty of films right now, ranging from Raya and the Last Dragon. You can see Nobody. Obviously, In the Heights is out right now. It's a great one to go out and see if you're a Lin-Manuel. I can never say his name right. Joey, help me out. Lin-Manuel Miranda. There we go. I just need someone to start me. But a lot of great movies are out right now, and if you want to get out and see a movie, you can do it safely at Marcus Theaters. They're still requiring masks in the theaters right now, unless you're in your seat eating or drinking. You can use the Marcus Theaters app on your smartphone. Download that, and you can even order your concessions ahead of time for a more contactless experience at the movies. Find the one closest to you, the Marcus Theaters or the Movie Tavern location closest, by going to marcustheaters.com and clicking the link there to find the one closest to you. Buy your tickets right there on the website, and you are good to go. Marcus Theaters for the best movie-going experience in the galaxy. But we want to talk to Clayton and Elizabeth about Roadhead. It seems like I saw some of it. It's like a dark comedy, a horror. It kind of hits a few boxes. So we'll start with Elizabeth. Talk about getting cast and what you thought when you first read the script.
Oh, gosh. Well, before we were involved with this film, I happened to be good friends with the director of the film, David Del Rio. We crossed paths years earlier in an acting class. And so that was my kind of way in, and I was more interested in working with my friend than I didn't know any of the other producers, or I hadn't read the script or anything like that. But I just took it as an opportunity to kind of casually go in, hang out, have an audition with a good friend of mine. I wasn't stressed about it or anything like that. And then, I just really responded to the scenes. They had us audition with some of the really epic, emotional scenes from the film. And I didn't really treat it as a comedy. I treated it as a very serious horror movie. So I think that sometimes helps make it funnier.
Yeah, absolutely.
We had auditions and we had callbacks. We had a chemistry read with Clayton and Damien Joseph Quinn, who plays Alex, and the three of us just hit it off. I mean, there was so much chemistry. It was so effortless. It's so funny between the three of us. So the rest is history.
And Clayton, did you have the same kind of feeling when you read the script, and was your audition process similar to Elizabeth's?
Yeah, it was similar. I mean, we all met at the first callback, and we were like, I think this is going to be us. But, I mean, the script is wild. This is a wild, I don't know if you've seen it, but it's a wild, classic B horror movie, and people are having a lot of fun with it. I'll go ahead and spoil it. My head gets chopped off. So, spoiler. But for me, I have fun doing horror films where I get to, sit to have the fake head built. I like being covered in blood. I like all that stuff.
Just in general, is horror kind of like your preferences as far as that goes, or it's just you have a tolerance for sitting in the makeup chair while having that done?
I think that there's a wild thing that, there's these little skills that actors have that you don't really realize you need. And there's things like that. Can you sit still for 6 hours while people are putting plaster on your face? Can you lay in the desert covered in blood for 5 hours? Those are the things they don't teach you in drama school.
No kidding.
No
wow.
kidding.
And I was looking at your IMDb pages. When you guys met and were talking, did you guys discuss that you've both been in Grey's Anatomy? Obviously separate episodes, but did you both discuss that?
Oh my gosh, no.
I don't even think I knew that.
Yeah.
Well, I actually didn't do Grey's Anatomy till after Roadhead.
Oh, okay. Yeah, the IMDb thing, I guess it depends on release when they came out, because it was a little higher up on the chart for when I listed.
I think in New York, Criminal Minds is kind of the show that like every actor, it's kind of like a notch in your belt.
No, in New York, it's Law and Order. It's Law and Order.
Law and Order. And out here, I think Grey's Anatomy is one of those. So whatever you, so were you? Let me ask you, Elizabeth, were you a patient or a doctor?
I was a patient.
Okay.
I was almost a doctor on that show once. I was pinned, but I ended up being a patient, and it was actually a really sad, beautiful episode. But that's not what we're here to talk about.
No. I like going off on little tandems, so you'll have to excuse me, because I've got notes, like put little things down that I want to talk to each one of you about. But Clayton, obviously not a stranger to horror TV. Scream Queens, that was another one. So when you're doing a horror film, and I'll direct it to both of you again. We'll start with Clayton since I'm on you. But do you have like a certain, I guess, mindset as to what you think a horror film should be, or are you totally going blank slate and you just trust the director to give you the places you're supposed to go mentally and dramatically?
I mean, like with most genre things, like a lot of the characters service the script in a certain way. So for me, it's kind of fun to be the person who, I don't even know if I did this in Roadhead, that was more Damien, but the person who's like scared of what is happening, but still decides that they're going to like go for it and fight. Like that's what the character I like to play in horror movies. But in Roadhead, I mean, there's a whole kind of separate cult that they encounter. There's a drag queen. There's a lot of unexpected things happening there. So there's a lot of different roles I could have played, I guess.
It's a lot. I mean, it takes you from one extreme to another with this film. Elizabeth, same question. When you're doing horror, do you have like a preconceived notion kind of about horror genre? And did this one upset your preconceived notions at all?
I don't. I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, but I just kind of do the scene as realistically as I can, as if I was in those circumstances. And that's just all I do as an actor. So I probably could be a smarter actor. Clayton is so smart to consider the different genres and the functions and the kind of tropes and things, but I kind of don't do that. And yeah, I just go for it. I think maybe in this case it kind of worked because Stephanie is the center of the film, so she's kind of the energetic center, and she's the one thinking through. She's kind of the straight man almost in terms of grounding the movie. So maybe it worked okay for this one, but I just go for it. And in this case, if anything, because there was a comedic element, maybe I just let myself go for it, even to the greater extremes, knowing that this movie does not take itself that seriously. It's funny, and we all had a great time doing it. Go ahead, Clayton. What were you going to say?
I actually made the comment the other day talking to someone about this movie. I was like, I think this movie would be like even bigger if the acting was bad in it, but the acting's good in it. So
unfortunately.
Like the acting's really good. So it's this great pairing of this wacky, wild B movie and like good acting. I mean, I know you're not supposed to say that about yourself, but here I am saying it.
You're very good. I think you may as well say it.
Look, we're amazing actors, okay? That's all I can say.
And for those who are wondering, the movie Roadhead is out as of, I believe, came out, I think, June 4th. Is that correct? It's out as of June 4th, streaming?
Yeah, on Prime, on Google Play, and you can rent it on all the different platforms. It's out there. Roadhead. I'm so glad we can say this on the this radio station, because we can't say it on others. Well,
and again, it's because the reason is when they're driving through the desert, they see two heads in the middle of the road. That's the only connotation that there could possibly be for the movie. That's built into the title.
You're right.
So
exactly.
So just for anybody who's wondering, that's why, of course. And It is that little tongue-in-cheek kind of nod to the movie and things that happen in the movie and things like that. But it's I like movies that, because horror can go one of two ways. It either has to be very well done and like super scary and everything, or it's got to have fun. It has, and this movie kind of walks the line of both, because it seems like it's a fun, like I said, it takes all these weird twists as you're going along. It's not kind of what you expect. One of my favorite movies is From Dusk Till Dawn. And it starts out as a straight, cops and robbers type thing, and then left turns into vampire territory. And this movie reminds me of that one, which is a compliment, trust me.
Yes. You know what I love about our movie? It's weird.
Yes.
It's a weird movie. They do not make weird movies anymore. All the movies now are like extremely like slick and awesome and like take themselves very seriously, and they're super high budget and all this kind of stuff. And even the lower budget features or indie features are still, super meaningful and like still taking themselves good, which is of course wonderful. But I miss the weird movies from the 90s, like the early 90s when I was growing up, like Dusk Till Dawn, and I could list so many others that are just like, that was kind of weird. That was a weird movie. And ours does that, and it does it on purpose. And it's one of the qualities I really love about it.
And like you alluded to, Elizabeth, one of those movies that you walk out of and you're talking about it afterwards, like, that was weird. Do you remember when this? And I think this is one of those movies that people, they're going to talk about after. Hey, remember that scene where the drag queen? It's. I think that's a good thing. So I think kudos to both of you for your roles in the movie, and I think it's just a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You know that? Yeah. This is a weird fact I heard the other day. Horror movies shouldn't be released around Halloween, because that's when major studios release their big movies. So there's too much competition. Who knew?
Yeah, I always thought horror movies, I know some people try to release them around Valentine's Day, because then you go out and you're seeing it with your significant other, and they get a little adrenaline rush, and that's,
They get scared.
It's brilliant.
Put their arm around you.
Yeah. I think.
And if you're single, that's what you want to watch.
Right.
You don't want to watch a rom-com.
Right, exactly. I'm going to go on single on Valentine's Day. I want to go see Freddy versus Jason in the theater. Thank you very much.
100%.
So what are some of your favorite horror movies? We'll start with Elizabeth. You if you had to say your top 5 favorite horror movies, what would you say?
5?
All right, we'll do 2. I'll make it easier. That's a lot to throw at you right off.
I could maybe do 5, but for the first 2 things that came to my mind when you said that were Carrie and The Exorcist.
Oh, yes.
I love the classics. I also love, anything Hitchcock, of course. And then there's this really weird movie that came out back in the day called What Lies Beneath.
Yes, I saw that one.
Pfeiffer. I love that
Harrison
movie.
Ford, yeah.
Harrison Ford. That one freaked me out. It was cool. They laid all the little, details, and you have to figure it out at the end.
And I think that was the first movie I ever saw where Harrison Ford played the bad guy, too. Again, spoiler alert for those of you who haven't seen a movie since 1999.
Oh, yeah.
But
that's a spoiler, but it is, I think, we're past the jurisdiction of spoilers for that one. What about you, Clayton?
My favorite horror movie of all time is this movie called It Follows. It came out maybe it's just about a creature that just follows people, and you have it's like a metaphor for an STD. It's very weird, but it's a beautiful. It's not just one of my favorite. It's not just one of my favorite horror movies. It's one of my favorite movies ever. I also love, of course, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, because I'm from Texas. Hereditary is a great movie, like all the Ari Aster movies.
I love him. Yes, good.
And Midsommar. I'm really digging those movies lately. What was the movie that Elizabeth, what's her name? Handmaid's Tale did at the beginning of pandemic?
The Invisible Man.
The Invisible Man.
Yes. I loved that movie.
Yeah, I like when they change up a classic, because obviously we think of The Invisible Man, the old monster movies like Wolfman and things like that, but I like it when they change things up.
They did it. They changed it up, and because we're always like, we don't need to see that again, but they did a great job with it.
And it was a metaphor for gaslighting, which is really cool.
Yeah.
See, I'm talking with 2 actors about horror movies. We're getting very deep into what it's it's a metaphor for STDs. It's a metaphor for gaslighting. We're getting really deep into these movies. This is fun.
Well, I feel like that's what
in our movie. Go ahead, Clayton.
Well, I was just going to say that's what horror is really about. It's getting to like these like what are people's like deepest fears? What are our the real things that we're afraid of? And then you put it in this kind of like gory thing, but it's all about like the true fears people have. Good horror.
Right.
That's my
and
opinion.
like it reveals, like being in really high stakes situations reveals a person's character.
Yeah.
Right.
So
And
I'd say
certainly
Stephanie's got some great character
does that.
then, revealing her true character in Roadhead, because that was, like I said, that had to be such a fun role to play.
Oh my God, what a dream. When we rewatched the movie last week, we had a premiere and I was like, oh yeah, this was so much fun to make. When do you get to do that? And especially as a woman of color being the lead of a horror movie, I don't know when I've ever seen that. I don't know if you guys can think of an example. I'm having a hard time. And then, having this character be, or even just a woman, like, that's like super smart and super angry, you know? Like,
Yeah, I can think of
what
some
I love
foreign
about-
horror films, but not too many American horror films where that's the case. So again, Roadhead is out as of June the 4th. We've just got about a minute left. I should have had you guys on for longer because I didn't get to talk to you guys. Clayton, you're my 4th Days of Our Lives alumni that I've had on the show. I was going to kind of talk a little bit about that. And I wanted to talk to Elizabeth about voicing a Jedi Master in Jedi Fallen Order. But so we'll have to have you both back on. But let people know as we're wrapping up here where they can find you both online if they want to keep up with your work. Start with Elizabeth.
Yes, thank you so much. The best place to interact with me is on my Instagram. It's my name at Elizabeth A. Grullón, Grullon.
And Clayton?
Yeah, just I post a lot of comedy videos on Instagram and Facebook, and it's just at Clayton Farris. Farris, Farris. Come hang out on Instagram.
And he's hilarious. Follow him. It is a treat.
And we'll make sure to put a link to those in the show notes. That's going to do it for the show. So Clayton Farris and Elizabeth Grullón, I appreciate you both being on the show tonight. Hopefully we can have you both back on very soon.
Thank you. Check out Roadhead, guys, on Amazon Prime.
Amazon
Thank you.
Prime, June 4th, Roadhead. Thanks again. That is going to do it for us. Until next week, my friends.
Bye.
It's not in the way you watch iZombie. It's not in the way you watch The Flash. It's not in the way you love Scotty Young art. It's not in the way you play Mario Kart. It's not in the way you look when you make Game of Thrones references. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio. That's our show. This is Geek to Me Radio.
Thank you, Acme Acres. Good night.
Hey kids, are your parents about to buy you a shiny new toy from Amazon?
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Well, don't be selfish. Share some of that money with us. Before going on Amazon, make sure to type in bit.ly/geek2me in the web browser. It will look just like Amazon.com, except it'll say referral Geek to Me Radio up top. And then when you check out, a tiny percentage will go to support the show without costing you 1 cent more. So before your parents get you that gizmo, gadget, or widget, make sure they type in bit.ly/geek2me in the web browser.
Bit.ly/geek2me. Bit.ly/geek2me.